I think there was a little hesitation in applause only because that was so beautiful. How fortunate we are to have a choir. Thank you. Gracias. So one thing, if it is at all possible, I think that we may need a little more cool air in here. If anybody has that ability to make that happen, we certainly have the cool factor with everybody here, but we need the air to reflect that cool factor, I think. Okay. So I spoke a couple of weeks ago, and I talked about the importance of trust and trusting the self, and how you need to trust yourself, and how that relates to our ability to trust God. Well, today I'm going to talk about trusting God and what it means to trust God, at least for me, what it means to trust God. Now, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, but then I'll catch you on the flip side, okay? There are a lot of books written right now on relationships, right? You know, you have the 5 languages of love and how to make friends and influence people. And then, of course, my favorite, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, right? Which that was very helpful for me, because at the point in time, it made me realize that the women in my life were not crazy. They were just from Venus. I'm just kidding. A lot of my friends are from Venus, so it's good. But those books are really written so that we understand the other person better, right? Because in our ability to understand the other person, we can then create a deeper, more meaningful relationship. Well, I think the same is true about God. Because as I look at my life, what I know is that my thoughts and beliefs about God in different times in my life definitely had a huge impact on my relationship with God. I'm going to take a sip here real quick. When I was a kid, my mother taught me about God. Taught me that about oneness, that we are all connected, that we are all one. That was very important to her. She especially emphasized to me the importance of the fact that we are all connected, that we are all brothers and sisters, particularly those people of color, that we are all one. And mind you, this is 1962, okay? She taught me that there is no spot where God is not. I remember her taking me to Marin City. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Marin City, but it's in the 60s. It was a place where basically all the people of color lived, right? And I remember her loading the back of the car full of all these gifts and presents for Christmas. And she took us, she took my younger brother and I there, and we met at the church there, and she gave all of these gifts, and what I realized at that point in time was that we were probably the only white people around anywhere. And she was so comfortable there. And I stayed there for the day. We played. It was great. It was a wonderful thing. My mother passed away when I was 6 years old. And shortly after that was my first experience with God, of really knowing God. Because that voice from within me came to me, and it spoke to me. And it told me that I was loved. It told me that my mom was in the perfect place. It was okay. she was being well cared for. And it also told me that I was always going to be well cared for too, that I was in a safe place. It also told me that, believe it or not, to make the salad. And I know that sounds a little kooky, and I've shared this story before, but it was because I love salad and nobody else in my family did. And so what I knew is that if I wanted something, that I could make it happen. So after that experience, you see, my family didn't go to church. We didn't go to church. And so after that experience of meeting God and having that voice within me and knowing that voice within me, I wanted to go to church because everybody that knew God went to church. And so I would get my little clip-on tie. I was about 6 or 7 years old. And I remember, it's funny because I felt this morning when I was waiting, because I got up about 5:30 this morning. I got dressed, and all I was doing was waiting, looking at the clock so I could get started because I was so excited about being here this morning. But I would sit there and I would wait for my next door neighbor to get in their car to go to church, and I'd run over there and I'd say, can I go? Can I go? But basically what that amounted to was just being put into the kids' classes. I didn't really learn much about God there. And since my family didn't really support it, I just had that voice within. And as I got older in my teens, I began to go to other churches. I began to experience and learn about God from a different perspective. In her book on trust, Aya Van Zandt talks about her experience of God when she was young, and it spurred me to remember my experience in those teens and young adult years. The first thing she said was, I learned that God is white, and God's a man, and that God knows everything that you do all the time. God's watching. And if you're good, then God is going to bless you. But if you're not good, you better look out. And if you don't believe in the Son of God, then you could go to hell. Well, that's kind of a scary God to me. But the good news was, if you repented, then God would forgive you. And that was good. The thing about it is that some cultures, we as a society, as mankind, we tend to humanize God and give God human characteristics, We think that God acts the way that we act, that God feels jealousy or gets angry and all of these other things. And so that was the kind of God that I was learning about. And so eventually, after several years, I began to realize that the God that I knew and the God that I was learning about was not the same. So it didn't work for me, It just didn't work. I mean, if you were gay or homosexual, then at that point in time, in those days, that was like, you can't come here. Now it's, you're welcome, however, because everybody sins and we're just not going to judge. That's not the God that I know. That's not the God that was speaking to me. And so I came to this church. Somehow, some way or another, I ended up here. And I heard the message. And the first thing I heard was Dr. Carolyn saying, there is no spot where God is not. And I went, woo, yeah. I like that. And I began to learn about God again. And all the things that I learned began to sing to me and vibrate within me. And it became something I could really hold on to. And I could create a deeper, loving relationship with. So what I'm saying here is that we got to know our God. And the God within me may not be the same God that speaks to you. I know that there is only one God, that I know. But the God within each one of us may be different for each one. And so I honor that in any and all ways. I'm just telling you about the God that I know. And so I began to learn about this God here at the center. And what I learned was from Judge Thomas Troward, okay, who was a big influence on Ernest Holmes. Ernest Holmes, in The Science of Mind, he looked at Judge Troward, and he wrote Judge Troward so you could understand it. Okay? So understanding Judge Troward is pretty tricky, because The Science of Mind is fairly tricky too. You learn it, you work with it, and you absorb it, but it takes a little bit. But Judge Troward says that God created the universe by contemplating itself. The universe is a reflection of the contemplation of God, of itself. That's amazing. So it's basically the universe is God in physical form. And that all the attributes of God, the peace, the power, the love, the joy, the light, the life, all of it is in this universe. This universe, for me, I look at the universe and it's like this apparatus of God. It's our playground. It's our place. It's our gift that God has given to us to say, hey, through your thoughts, through your beliefs, you can create and manifest your life, whatever it is you desire. Now, that's a God I can get behind, right? That's a God that I long to get closer to know more and to know better. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm at this center. But there's some things that get in the way sometimes of us knowing God. For me, I know. One of those areas is placing my belief and my trust in things of the flesh, things in the world, versus placing my belief and trust in the things of God. They're called attachments. Has anybody ever heard of attachments? Yeah. Yeah, they're tricky little guys, because they get you stuck, and they act as a buffer between your soul's desire to know and be intimate with God. It acts as a block, these attachments that we have to things of the world. And they may be simple things like just being so attached to the idea of how people think of you. Being so concerned and overly worried about how you look to the world and the things that you might do. It may be an attachment to money. It may be attachment to your work. Attachments are tricky. But in her book by Carolyn Mace called Entering the Castle, has anybody read this book? Raise your hand if you've read this book, because this book is amazing. We're using this book in our practical mysticism class. And, in the class, we read little parts and pieces of it. But now that I have really come in contact with this book, I am planning to do a book study using this book after I finish the other class, because it is that meaningful, that powerful. And I'd like to share with you a little piece out of it. So I spoke about attachments, right? You can imagine what detachment is about. Okay, so she writes, detachment is a spiritual necessity because you cannot serve two realities simultaneously. You cannot be honest and dishonest at the same time. You cannot be married and single at the same time. You cannot forgive and remain bitter. You cannot truly let go, yet continue to hold on. And you cannot acknowledge the higher reality of spiritual life and divine guidance, yet do things or hold beliefs that defy your spiritual principles. Herein lies the cosmic battleground for the soul on matters of attachment. At the end of the day, what power is more seductive to you, Earth's or God's? She goes on, no one answers that question just once. Very true, right? You are confronted with it many times. Every time you close your eyes and ask for guidance, you know deep in your soul that the answer will always necessitate that you make a choice between faith in the unseen domain of God and the material world. Because of this reluctance to trust, people spend their entire lives standing on the drawbridge to their souls, knowing that they are being divinely called, feeling a yearning to know God, yet they cannot bring themselves to cross the bridge to the soul because they fear what might become of their attachments. Whew. That's heavy. That's a lot of stuff there, you know? Examining our attachments. So this idea, this process of detaching from our attachments, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean that God wants your house and all your money and all of that stuff. It's not about that. Detaching, looking at your attachments and detaching from those attachments is about examining when you are at a point where you are feeling discouraged, when you're feeling fearful, when you're feeling, what's the word? What's that? Smothered. Whatever it might be. You know, we have all these emotions and these feelings, and they're wonderful because they let us know that something is up, something's not right, that perhaps we are attaching to something. And so it gives us an idea that, you know what? Why am I feeling this? I need to look at this attachment and see where am I giving my power? Am I giving my power to an attachment that is of the earth, of the flesh, or am I giving my power and is it of God? And you know, abundance is a great example of that. Or love in our love life is a great example of that. If you put all of your love and trust into another individual and that is all that you know, and you leave God out of the picture, chances are pretty good, not chances are good, but you're putting your love and trust into something that is going to change and may fluctuate and may cause a lot of hurt and pain. What I know is that my source of love is God. And as my source in love being of God, then I know that and I abide in God, then the energy and the person that I am attracts love into my life. It is an ongoing, abundant circulation of love in my life. And I am grateful and I am thankful for all of that love that is in my life. But my attachment is in God. I absolutely have no idea where I am on my notes. Okay. Okay, here we go. I have one other thing to say. God does not forgive us. God has no reason to forgive us. That's a human thing. That's something we have to do. But God doesn't need to forgive us because you are perfect. Each one of you are perfect and whole, and you are complete, and God only sees you in that way. There's nothing to forgive. Hallelujah. Always wanted to do that. That's good. Take that off my bucket list. There we go. Oh, my goodness. Here we go. Okay. Buddha taught, the cause of suffering is attachment. The end of attachment means the end of suffering. So much of my work now is about identifying and letting go of attachment, letting go of those things that bind me. But also realizing that I can live, and I do live, a wonderful, abundant life with all that it is that I need. But I don't allow those attachments to in any way bind my communication, my relationship with God. Joel Goldsmith. Some of you may or may not have heard of him. He wrote The Foundation of Mysticism. And in that book, he talks about pendulums. So I have a pendulum here. It's a Minnie Mouse. Oh, turn around. There we go. Okay. So he talks about pendulums, okay? And he talks about the need for us. Well, it's interesting because it was written in 1958, and it's really transcripts from classes that he taught. So he refers to normal people, okay? So in the 50s, I guess there were some normal people, I don't know. But I catch the drift of what he's saying, you know. And what I know is that the more when I don't abide in God, okay, when I get away from my spiritual practice, when I am not taking the time to really go to that place with God, when things happen, it's kind of like a pendulum. Now, a pendulum doesn't move unless there's an energy or force that moves it, correct? And so what the way he describes it is these things in the world get us moving. Like, and I think he would probably say, at the time he was saying, you know, news of the war would get people really moving and upset. And then maybe even somebody making a comment about you that might in some way offend you, might get you upset. And there's a lot of that going around. A lot of people getting offended about things going around. And he says that causes you to just move all around, all these different things. You know, maybe somebody gives you the idea that you're not worthy, that you're not enough in some way. And so all of these things can hit you, and pretty soon your whole life is moving around all over the place. But when we abide in God, and he talks a lot about abiding in God in the Word of God, but not just in the Word of God, but when we abide in God and we make God our practice of life. And he talks about waking up in the morning, and the first thought is God, and appreciation and gratitude. And I know Reverend Terry talked about gratitude in the meditation this morning. It was beautiful. But that we wake up in total gratitude and appreciation. That we begin to recognize everything as our source is all coming from God, and we recognize the beauty of it and the abundance of it, whether it's taking a nice shower and getting ready and doing and looking in the mirror and doing your mirror work and realizing how incredibly awesome you are, you know. And what an amazing thing this electric sonic toothbrush is, or whatever it might be, and then enjoying your breakfast and taking the time to acknowledge and appreciate the food that you're taking in and this incredible body that you have and the way that it works and the way it functions, and then opening the door to the outdoors and the abundance and glory that is out there, and just abiding in God. Then when that stuff hits, you're calm. You're at peace. You're well grounded. Your soul has the ability to make that connection with the divine. Abiding in God. I love that word abiding. It's just so all-encompassing. And so now my spiritual practice, my way of thinking is all about how can I abide more in God. And what I find is happening for me is that I perceive everything differently. When comments are made that I might take offense to, when somebody gives me a, sign language middle finger salute or whatever it might be, I look at it differently. And I know it sounds so cliche, but all I can see and feel is love. That's it. That's all I can see and feel. When I am abiding in God, that's all that I can know. It doesn't hurt me. I'm able to see beyond it and to know. And what I know is that wherever God is, whenever I call upon God and I abide in God, that's where God is. So I know that I am standing on holy ground right now because God is in me. Let's pray. And so what I know is that God is here right now. That the infinite wisdom and light and life flows easily and freely and vibrantly throughout this entire community. I know that there is a release of any attachments that in any way bind or block that communion, that deep relationship with God. What I know is as we move as a community together to reveal our new minister, that it's done so from a foundation and a place of abiding in God.